This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Ain't crazy the mix of emotions that we have in the offseason. On one hand, every fan base, all 32 of them, no matter how trash their team was last year, no matter how good their team was, no matter how many veteran players they lost, every fan base right now has something that they're excited about. Every single one of them has a reason to believe right now that this is going to be the year where they surprise some folks, right? Now, that definition, what would be something that surprised some folks, can range from winning the Super Bowl to winning more than 5 games to being over 500, right? Like we've been through that tier list of what would surprise people as Browns fans. But every fan base right now has reason to believe that they have nothing to worry about. If you're the Carolina Panthers or you're a Carolina Panthers fan, this is going to be the year that Bryce Young shows them. Right? If we drafted Bryce Young, we would have to hope, not believe necessarily, but hope for the betterment of the team that Bryce Young would be stepping up as the #1 overall pick. If you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you're excited because you just brought in Xavier Worthy, you're coming off a two-peat. You know, everybody has things that they're excited about. But also at the same time that those excitement feelings exist, we're going to explore the reasons that Browns fans should be excited about this upcoming season in a video that I'm going to drop on Tuesday. That's not what we're here to talk about. Because as much excitement as there is, every time you get excited, every time you see somebody put up a cut up of a Browns thing, you like, hey, we gonna eat, or they show you some highlights of some players that's coming back from injury and you excited, there's that in your mind, right? It pokes through these negative thoughts, these things that are in the back of your head that are telling you, yeah, that's cool, but we gotta think about this, right? There are things that when you think about the upcoming season are naturally going to make you nervous. Now, I want to preference this whole conversation by saying this. Just because there are things that make you nervous does not mean that those things are guaranteed to be bad or that those things are guaranteed to run into the worst case scenario. It's just that you're worried about the worst case scenario being possible more than you are about things that you feel like are definite, right? Like these aren't things that you're 100% sure on. These are things that you might be anywhere from 70 to 30% sure on. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What are the things on the Browns roster or in the dynamic of the Cleveland Browns going into 2024-25 that make Browns fans nervous? I'll start out with the biggest elephant in the room. It's Deshaun Watson. I think everybody's a little bit on edge with Deshaun Watson. There are the Deshaun Watson diehards that followed him through Houston. There are the Browns fans who wanted a change at quarterback and were excited to bring Deshaun Watson in and want this whole thing to work out. There are Browns fans who are pretty neutral on this whole thing. There are Browns fans who are Baker Mayfield diehards or other quarterback diehards and just have decided that they don't want Deshaun Watson and actively reject him. And between all 4 of those fiefdoms, like whatever you want to call them, right, whatever sect it is that you belong to in this war, which is silly, all 4 of them are nervous for different reasons. But not really different reasons. They're nervous because they want different results. If you are a Deshaun Watson diehard, your argument is, I believe that Deshaun Watson will return to 2020 form and will be healthy, right? Even in your affirmation of Deshaun Watson, you're acknowledging That is an open question about if these things will happen. He's a question mark. He's a question mark in both ways, by the way. Like, I just think we don't know what Deshaun Watson is at this point. We have evidence that points in one direction. We have evidence that points in the other direction. We don't really know. We can guess. We could talk about what we think will be true, but we don't know because we just haven't seen enough. And even the people who are negative about Deshaun Watson, people who don't want Deshaun Watson or have decided that they never wanted Deshaun Watson for reasons and have made those points, but even when they make those points, they're saying, I believe Deshaun Watson will be bad or will not be able to stay healthy because of this or that. But it's not like there's a larger pattern of him not being able to stay healthy. It's not like the bulk of his work in his career is of a bad quarterback. We don't know either way. And that's what makes us nervous about Deshaun Watson. Some people, some Browns fans, are nervous that Deshaun Watson will succeed, as equally as some Browns fans are nervous that Deshaun Watson will not succeed. Me personally, I'm just curious. Like, I want the Browns to be good. I personally have made this take plenty of times. No matter how much I say it, the different camps in this whole Deshaun Watson thing hear different things whenever I say it. But the reason I'm curious and not nervous about it is because I truly believe that this team can win with a very wide range of quarterback play. So I don't think Deshaun Watson is gonna change whether this team's gonna be good or not at the very base of it. Like, will they be able to win a Super Bowl? Those kind of things around the edges change, but we'll talk about that if we get there. As far as just talking about how the team's going to be, I think they're going to be good no matter what. They've won 11 games with 6 different quarterbacks starting. I think this team's pretty quarterback proof. That's why I'm curious more than I'm nervous about this. But there are people who are nervous that Deshaun Watson will fail. And there are people who are nervous that Deshaun Watson will succeed. Very nervous. It's all over the conversation. I can't mention his name without somebody writing a 4-piece diatribe about how they assume I feel about Deshaun Watson, how they're angry at me for not liking him enough, or accuse me of being a Deshaun Watson fanboy because I refuse to lie about the work that Deshaun Watson put. If I do a rewatch and he played well, and I state in the rewatch he played well, people get mad at me. I'm I'm not about to lie. Okay. So it's a mess, and it will continue to be a mess because legitimately, and this is a different nature of a situation about nervousness than literally everything else on this list. Everything else, I think Browns fans are united on being nervous about because they're nervous about the impact to the team and they want the team to be good. This situation with Deshaun Watson, the nerves, I don't think really have anything to do with what the team does and have more to do about what people want to say about the quarterback position and the trade for the quarterback. I think there are people who will legitimately be okay if Deshaun Watson put up great numbers and the team underperformed from a win-loss perspective just so they can justify the trade. And I also think that there are people on the other side of this who would be excited if the team sucked this year, Deshaun Watson sucked this year, just so they could justify their hatred of the trade. I think the entire conversation about Deshaun Watson has escaped being about the Cleveland Browns and the success of the Cleveland Browns. And that's why I don't think the nerves about it have much to do about the Cleveland Browns. I think people truly invested in the Browns' success are pretty neutral on this whole thing. It might work out, it might not, but we do see a team that can clearly win, even if Deshaun Watson's not playing well, or that can clearly win if Deshaun Watson is playing well, which is obvious. Now we're talking about things on the team that affect the team's ability to win and succeed. There are some other players that I think are much more interesting to talk about from a team win-loss standpoint. Juan Thornhill is one of those guys. I look at this defense, I think to myself, Juan Thornhill makes me a little nervous. The reason Juan Thornhill makes me nervous is twofold. One, the level of play wasn't consistent. Two, the ability to stay on the field wasn't consistent. I think we saw too much of Ronnie Hickman this year. I think we saw too much of DeAnthony Bell this year, and that's because Juan Thornhill was in and out. And the book on Juan Thornhill is that he's been a injury-prone type player. Like his entire career, it's been questionable whether he stays healthy. I think he stayed healthy 1 year in Kansas City, or maybe 1.5 years in Kansas City, but that's really it. So he has a long track record of being unavailable for football games. And it's not like when he was out there, he was such a difference maker that it was super noticeable. I don't think he was bad. I do think people go out their way to say Juan Thornhill is bad because Juan Thornhill does choose to beef with certain fans on Twitter. And that's just going to make people look for things to like not like about Juan Thornhill. I don't think those things are true. I think Juan Thornhill is fine when he's out there. But he's not like undeniably good or making all of the plays in the world. He's just making good plays, smart plays there. He's definitely better than having Ronnie Hickman out there for a bunch of snaps. But he's not so much better that you feel like you have one of the better safeties in the league. He's a good player. A good player who's unavailable, a good player who you do need to be out there because your only backup is a second-year undrafted player. Look, I know we like Ronnie Hickman, but we saw the limitations of Ronnie Hickman in that playoff game with C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud tore him apart. I'm a little nervous. I want Juan Thornhill to stay healthy. I want Juan Thornhill to be more than just a solid player. I want Juan Thornhill to make plays this year. I want Juan Thornhill to do things like he did against the Chiefs in the preseason last year. Like I want him to be that guy. I want him to get turnovers. I want him to be a ball hawk. I want him to be the guy that we thought he was coming out of West Virginia. He has not been that, nor has he been healthy. That makes me nervous about Juan Thornhill. Another area of the team that makes me nervous is the other defensive tackle position. I'm not as nervous about this as I'm curious because I think there's not really a bad option you can go with. A lot of people like Quentin Jefferson because of his his pass rush win rate. But I'm not 100% sold on him. Maurice Hurst is good, but similar to Juan Thornhill, has a long track record of not being healthy. So you can't necessarily super rely on him. I like Michael Hall, but he's a 20-year-old rookie. So definitely not going to have the most faith in him to step up immediately, right? Like I think that would be an unfair expectation of Michael Hall, to be honest. And then there is Siaki Ika. I mean, Dalvin Tomlinson, I'm rock solid on, but we're not talking about that defensive tackle spot. We're talking about the other defensive tackle spot. And then like Shelby Harris, I like, but Shelby Harris is getting older and older. And like he was a good hand last year, but he wasn't necessarily a game breaker at that other defensive tackle spot. I think this defensive tackle room has a lot of potential. But I also worry that other defensive tackle spot might not be equipped to stop the run up the middle, which was a consistent problem for this team last year. And I'm just wondering if that's just a problem that we're just going to have. Like if that's just a consequence of running the Jim Schwartz defense, is that sometimes you're not going to be able to stop the run up the middle. Every defense has its flaws. Every defense has its holes that you just have to live with, right? Every single one. This just might be the hole in the Jim Schwartz defense. It's like when you run the wide nine and you spread the gaps out like that, it just makes it easier to run up the middle. It does help you with pass rush. It does help you get more sacks. It does help you be more lethal on third down. But, you're going to struggle a little bit because you're leaving a lot of the interior run game to linebackers. And maybe that's what Jordan Hicks is there for. But the other defensive tackle spot is something that I am a little nervous about. Another thing that I think I'm nervous about and Browns fans are nervous about, because I get a lot of messages about this, is the running back position. I think people are, in general, nervous about Nick Chubb, and for good reason. He had one of the most devastating knee injuries we've seen, quite frankly, since the last time Nick Chubb had a knee injury, and that was in college, right? Like, he has had two of the most brutal knee injuries you can ever witness in your life. There is a serious question about like how good can Nick Chubb be, period, coming back from this, and also in year one of coming back from this, and also at the age that he's attempting to come back from this. Now, he's not ancient. He's like 28 years old, but it's kind of at the tail end of when you expect people to just be able to bounce back from injuries, right? Early 20s, mid 20s, you don't worry about that. Late 20s, you start to worry about if there's going to be a dramatic fall off of athleticism after a lower extremity injury, especially after a second lower extremity injury. So I think a lot of Browns fans are nervous about that. One, when will Nick Chubb be back? Will Nick Chubb be Nick Chubb if he comes back? And what version of Nick Chubb do we get once he comes back? Like, is he going to be the full Nick Chubb? Like, what are we getting? I think rightfully, a lot of fans are nervous about this. If you look behind Nick Chubb, I think people get even more nervous because Donta Foreman, I think, is a good running back. I think he's a bit underrated. I think he's had some promising numbers when it comes to his advanced splits and his averages. But like, Donta Foreman's not somebody you sign and it eases everybody's nerves because he's not a household name, right? So, people are going to be a little nervous. It's not like you signed Derrick Henry. It's not like you signed Saquon Barkley, like any of these big names that people be like, oh, we're going to be good. We got Saquon. That Donta Foreman does not give you that feeling. But I think he's a solid hand. We'll see in camp what he gives you. Jerome Ford makes a lot of people nervous just because Jerome Ford fumbled and Jerome Ford did not show us a great ability to see the field last year. That's how I put it. He had a lot of TFLs, and you don't want to be put in a position where Jerome Ford has to be your number one back. If Jerome Ford is your number 2 or number 3 back, I think you're fine. And the question is, hey, if Nick Chubb it can't play early in the year, like, does Jerome Ford become the number 1 back and we have the same issues? Like, does Donta Foreman only really replace Kareem Hunt? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what Donta Foreman's job is going to be with this team, but it's worth asking about. It's worth being a little nervous about, right? The running back position. Left tackle. This one, I'm like, if you ask me, what am I most nervous about? When I think of ways that, like, my hopes for this team can be crashed, what is the most often thing or position that comes up? And for me, it's left tackle. I have gone on the record and defended Jed Wills from some of his detractors because I do think the nature of the criticism of Jed Wills is often unfair and based on aesthetics, right? And I don't really mess with criticisms that are pretty much exclusively based off of aesthetics and euphemisms. Right? Where it's just like, oh, well, he doesn't hustle and all this stuff. I could care less about those kind of criticisms. My issue with Jed Wills isn't what happens after the play and the aesthetics of it, right? If you think he gives up on plays or doesn't. My issue with Jed Wills is just what happens in between that whistle. And I think that's what's gone missing in the analysis of him, because so many people are caught up in either defending Jed Wills because the nature of the criticism that so many people have ran with is just goofy, right? Like the nature of the criticism of Jed is just goofy. And I think those people have done their own argument a disservice, because if you just start breaking down what happens from whistle to the end of the play, there are some things with Jed that you're a little bit nervous about. It does not seem, it's year 3 of his transition to left side. It still does not seem that the hand and foot placement stuff has translated. It seems like sometimes he gets it down and he doesn't get beat inside, right? He goes right, left, jab, and he can get that hand work in. And sometimes he can't. Sometimes he stutters and go, am I supposed to, and puts the wrong hand out. And he just struggles with that. It's year 4 for Jed. And there were times last year where I thought to myself, man, I don't know if he's good enough to do what the Browns want to do. Now, to give Jed Wills credit, before he went out for the year, I think he played some of his best football against some of the toughest opponents of the year. And also the bulk of the time that he did struggle was when backup quarterbacks were out there, right? Like, that might have had something to do with it. So let me give Jed some grace here. But I don't know. I don't know. Like I look at one guy, I'm like, man, we could be talking about like why didn't we replace him, or like this is the one area where I'm like, hey, Andrew Berry is leaving himself to be criticized heavily about this because he did not choose to address it in any way other than like bringing in other swing tackles, and this could become a big topic of discussion. Now, with Jed Wills, like a bulk of this discussion is going to be about stupid shit. Like, and that's just why I think we haven't been able to talk about the legitimate like pitfalls of Jed Wills' level of play here, because most of the conversation is about his aesthetics. He wears a visor. He's got a shooter sleeve on. Like people get mad. Like people get mad about Jed about the dumb stuff, but we not getting mad about the stuff that I think actually matters. Or people get mad about Jed about things that they misinterpret, right? Like, oh, Jed's supposed to pick this guy up, and then he's not. Like he's actually doing what he's supposed to do. Or like it looks like he's giving up on a play, but he's just getting out the way because there's literally like nothing else he could do other than hurt the team. And those criticisms, I think, really do a disservice to talking about the pitfalls of Jed Wills. I think Jed has some legitimate issues with getting beat inside. It's been 4 years, 4 years. He still get beat inside consistently. It's a problem. It's a problem when he plays divisional opponents. He looks his worst. When guys are super familiar with him, it seems like they're really comfortable beating him. It's a problem. Now, he can correct it. He's still young. But I would like to point out, by year 5, an offensive tackle is usually who they're going to be. I know you could probably point to 1 or 2 outliers, but for the bulk of players that get drafted and play in the league, by year 5, they pretty much are who they're going to be. And I worry that who Jed is right now, right? Mid-level tackle. Is that good enough for what the Cleveland Browns need this year? Is that good enough to survive the transition into the Ken Dorsey offense? Like, is he going to get more one-on-ones because the Browns are trying to go into 11 personnel more often and throw the ball more? Like, is Jed Wills going to be something that kind of gets exploited this season? I'm worried about that. Like, that's the one thing I look at. I'm like, I need Jed to step up this year because I'm nervous about him. Wide receiver, I think, is an area that some people get nervous about. I'm not that nervous about wide receiver, to be honest with you. And the reason I'm not that nervous about wide receiver is because I trust Amari Cooper. David Njoku is in the pass game. I know that he's going to be there. I think Elijah Moore stepped it up at the end of last season. And I think Jerry Jeudy will be fine. Like, I think at the very minimum, you're going to get 800 to 900 yards from Jerry Jeudy. And that would be nice from a number 2 receiver, right? If Amari can get 1,200 again and Jerry gets like 900, we're good. Elijah Moore gets like 500. We're good. That's pretty good. It's pretty good production out your wide receivers, to be honest. But I get why people are nervous, right? Jerry Jeudy is a question mark. The public perception of him, I think, is a bit lower than like the actual reality of him. But the public perception is not super positive on him. Like, you would think that Jerry Jeudy gets like 200 yards a game, 200 yards a year, the way that people talk about him, instead of like 800 to 900 to damn near 1,000. But the public perception is low on Jerry Jeudy. I think public perception is equally as low on Elijah Moore, despite having a strong end to last year. And I think Amari Cooper still gets like consistently slept on, but I feel good about wide receiver, but I understand why some fans would be nervous about it based on perception alone. Another area where I feel fine with in most areas is linebacker, because I think Jordan Hicks will probably be able to fill the role that Anthony Walker was able to do. And if he can stay healthy, that would be a plus, because that was something that A-Walk was not ever really able to do consistently. Not really his fault, but it's there. And also, I think JOK is going to take a step. Now, you have to replace Sione Takitaki, about 15 snaps at Sam. And I do think that would be a task, but Nathaniel Watson, who they drafted in the 4th round this year, had 10 sacks at Mississippi State. I don't expect him to win that job, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does get that role, because That role is the crash out role, and they basically need a linebacker to crash out there. I also think that you can get somebody to fill that role once the UFL season is done. You can sign one of those guys. I think St. Louis Battlehawks have like 3 guys that you could probably put in that role there, and they would be fine on the NFL season. So I'm not really like pressed over replacing that role. I get why people would be, because you look at it and traditionally you think the 3 linebackers start, and that third starting linebacker position looks pretty weak. But the Browns play mostly in nickel, which means that they're only going to start 2 linebackers. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But those are the things that I think are making Browns fans nervous. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the conversation around Deshaun Watson. Are you nervous? Are you just curious? Or are you hoping that he stinks so the Deshaun Watson era can be done? Or are you hoping that he succeeds so you can be right about the Deshaun Watson trade? Or are you just a Browns fan who wants the team to win, and whatever helps the team win, helps the team win? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.